The package looked harmless enough, just an ordinary cardboard box wrapped in brown paper. Yet, as I peeled away the layers to reveal a worn baby blanket, a strange odor wafted up, striking me with an eerie chill. This wasn't the comforting scent of lavender and age I associated with Nana's keepsakes. "Jessie, why does this blanket reek of death?" Emma's high-pitched voice shattered the silence, her innocent question slicing through me like a knife. I froze, the coarse fabric clutched in my trembling hands as Mark entered the living room, his face draining of color. "What are you talking about, Mom?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Wordlessly, I held up the blanket, letting the putrid smell speak for itself. Mark's eyes widened in recognition, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. "That's not from Nana," he murmured, his voice strained. "It's from my mother." Of course. Patricia's menacing specter loomed over us once again, her twisted games infiltrating our sanctuary. I should have known better than to open that cursed package without Mark by my side. Emma tugged at my sleeve, her hazel eyes round with worry. "Why would Grandma send us something smelly, Mommy? That's not very nice." "It's not about being nice, sweetie," I managed, forcing a reassuring smile for her sake. "Grandma just has a different way of doing things, that's all." Mark sank onto the couch, cradling his head in his hands. I longed to comfort him, but the chasm between us seemed to widen with each new torment Patricia inflicted. As I clutched the offending blanket, a memory resurfaced. That first fateful meeting with my mother-in-law, her icy gaze piercing through me like I was already a ghost. If only I'd heeded the warning signs then, perhaps we could have avoided this toxic entanglement. But it was too late for regrets. Patricia had snared us in her web, and there was no escaping the inescapable truth. Her malice knew no bounds, and we were merely pawns in her twisted game. The first time I met Patricia, she looked through me as if I were a ghost. Mark had warned me about her frosty demeanor, but nothing could have prepared me for the utter disdain etched onto her features. It was our engagement party, a joyous occasion meant to celebrate the union of two families. Yet the moment we stepped into Patricia's immaculate living room, the atmosphere shifted, a palpable chill descending upon us. "So, this is the girl who's ensnared my son?" Patricia drawled, her eyes raking over me with undisguised contempt. "I must admit, Mark, I expected someone more." Mark tensed beside me, his grip on my hand tightening. "Mom, please, this is supposed to be a happy day." Patricia arched a perfectly groomed brow. "Happy? For whom exactly? Certainly not for a mother watching her only child make the biggest mistake of his life." The words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, stealing my breath away. I opened my mouth to respond, but Mark beat me to it. "That's enough, Mother." His voice was low, edged with a rare hardness. "If you can't be civil, we'll leave." For a fleeting moment, Patricia's mask slipped, revealing a flash of something akin to panic, but it vanished just as quickly, replaced by her trademark sneer. "Oh, very well." She waved a dismissive hand. "I'll play the gracious hostess, if only to avoid another tedious scene." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced pleasantries and thinly veiled barbs. Patricia made no effort to hide her disdain, criticizing everything from my choice of attire to my family's wealth. "It must be nice, having Daddy's money to fall back on," she remarked at one point, her lips curled into a mocking smile. "Some of us had to work for a living, you know." I bit my tongue, determined not to rise to her bait, but with each cutting remark, I began to see the true depth of Patricia's animosity, and the lengths she would go to make my life a living hell. As we finally escaped into the cool night air, Mark pulled me into a fierce embrace. "I'm so sorry, Jess. I had no idea she'd be that vile." I forced a brave smile, even as the weight of Patricia's hatred settled heavily upon my shoulders. "It's okay. We knew she wouldn't make this easy." But deep down, a seed of doubt had taken root, whispering that this was only the beginning, and that Patricia's wrath would someday consume us all. In-laws can be challenging, but Patricia was something else entirely. No matter how hard I tried to extend an olive branch, she seemed determined to sever any chance of a healthy relationship. It was Mark's father, Robert, who finally suggested a solution, one that left a bitter taste in my mouth. "Just give her what she wants," he said during one of our rare coffee meetings, his voice hushed as if afraid Patricia might overhear. "A little financial incentive, and she'll come around." I stared at him, incredulous. You want me to bribe your wife? Robert shifted uncomfortably in his seat. It's not a bribe, per se, just a gesture of goodwill from your family. Patricia's always felt insecure about not coming from money. So you're saying I should throw cash at her until she stops treating me like garbage? The words tumbled out before I could stop them, acidic with years of pent-up frustration. Robert's face reddened, and for a moment, I thought he might actually stand up for himself, or for me. But then his shoulders slumped, defeat etched into every line of his weathered face. Please, Jessie, just try it, for Mark's sake, if nothing else. I wanted to refuse, to tell Robert where he could shove his goodwill gesture. But then I pictured Mark's weary expression, the toll Patricia's hatred was taking on our once blissful marriage. Could a little bribery really be the answer? In the end, I agreed, if only to keep the peace. Patricia's demands started small at first, a new designer handbag here, a lavish spa weekend there, but it didn't take long for the requests to escalate, each one more outrageous than the last. A little birdie told me your father's firm just landed a major contract, she purred during one of her unannounced visits, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the table. Surely you could spare a few thousand for a much-needed kitchen renovation? I bristled at the casual way she referenced my family's finances, as if we were an open well for her to draw from at will. But I kept my expression carefully neutral, unwilling to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Of course, Patricia. Whatever you need. Her smile was saccharine, laced with the unmistakable tang of victory. Excellent. I knew you'd see reason, dear. As she swept out of the house, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume in her wake, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that I'd just made a deal with the devil herself. And this was only the beginning. You'll take Nana to her appointments now, Patricia announced one day, her tone leaving no room for argument. I stared at her, bewildered. What? But I thought you had hired a nurse to take care of her needs. Patricia waved a dismissive hand. That was only temporary. Nana prefers family, and you're not doing anything important these days anyway. The jab stung, but I bit my tongue. After years of tolerating Patricia's barbs, I had grown adept at swallowing my pride. Of course, I forced myself to say. Whatever Nana needs. And so it began, a relentless cycle of doctor visits, physical therapy sessions, and endless spent tending to Mark's ailing grandmother. Nana was a sweet woman, but her care was exhausting, especially with a rambunctious 6-year-old and a newborn baby at home. Still, I soldiered on, determined to prove my worth to Patricia, even as she piled on more and more demands. The nursing home isn't cutting it anymore, she declared one afternoon, sweeping into my living room uninvited. Nana needs to move in with us until she's back on her feet. I stared at her, aghast. But we don't have room for her here. And what about the round-the-clock care she needs? Patricia fixed me with a withering look. Well, you'll just have to make room, won't you? Unless, of course, you'd prefer to put her in one of those dreadful state-run facilities. The implication hung in the air, heavy and damning. I knew what Patricia was really saying. If I refused, I would be the one responsible for Nana's suffering. So, like always, I acquiesced, rearranging our entire lives to accommodate Nana's needs. The once peaceful sanctuary of our home was transformed into a makeshift hospital, with medical equipment and the ever-present scent of antiseptic. Through it all, Patricia watched with a critical eye, finding fault in every aspect of Nana's care. You're not doing the exercises properly, she would snap, shoving me aside to demonstrate the correct technique. No wonder she's not improving. Or, did you even bother to check her vitals this morning? You're lucky she's still alive with your level of incompetence. The insults cut deep, but I couldn't bring myself to retaliate, not when Nana's well-being was at stake. So I simply gritted my teeth and carried on, pouring every ounce of my energy into ensuring Nana wanted for nothing. Until one day when the strain of it all finally became too much to bear. Mommy, the baby in your tummy told me he's scared. Emma's words froze me in my tracks. My hand instinctively went to my still flat stomach as dread washed over me. What did you say, honey? Emma blinked up at me with those unnervingly perceptive eyes of hers. The baby. He says he doesn't want to come out yet because Grandma Patricia is being mean. My heart stuttered in my chest. How could she possibly know? Mark and I hadn't even confirmed the pregnancy yet. Emma, sweetie, what are you talking about? I forced a casual laugh, even as my mind raced. There's no baby in Mommy's tummy. But even as the words left my lips, I knew it was a lie. The queasiness, the fatigue, the subtle shifts in my body, all the signs had been there, staring me in the face. I had just been too preoccupied with appeasing Patricia to acknowledge them. Emma frowned, her little brow furrowing. But I heard him, Mommy. He's scared of Grandma. A lump formed in my throat. Of course the baby would be afraid. He could likely sense the tension, the constant strain that had become our daily reality, thanks to Patricia's toxicity. That evening, after putting Emma to bed, I forced myself to take the test. As the twin pink lines appeared, a mixture of joy and trepidation washed over me. A new life, a precious gift, and another pawn in Patricia's twisted games. The doctor's stark words only confirmed my fears. You'll need to take it easy over the next few months, she cautioned. This pregnancy is considered high risk due to your age and the stress factors. I nodded numbly, already imagining Patricia's snide remarks about my geriatric condition. As if I didn't have enough on my plate caring for Nana and managing her ever-escalating demands. Sure enough, when I finally broke the news, Patricia's reaction was everything I had dreaded and more. Another mouth to feed? She clucked her tongue disapprovingly. I should have known you'd find a way to burden us further. The words were like a physical blow, stealing my breath. But before I could muster a response, she was already sweeping towards the door, tossing one final barb over her shoulder. Well, I certainly hope you're not expecting a handout from me. You've drained enough resources as it is. I watched her go, my fists clenched at my sides, as a wave of impotent rage washed over me. In that moment, I knew something had to give, because if I didn't find a way to escape Patricia's toxic orbit, this baby wouldn't be the only one in danger. Mommy, Patricia took Nana's special necklace. I saw her. Emma's words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, willing myself to remain calm even as my heart raced. What do you mean, sweetie? Are you sure about this? Emma nodded solemnly. I saw her take it from Nana's room when she thought no one was looking. A sickening realization dawned on me. Of course, the vintage emerald pendant Nana had treasured for decades, passed down through generations. She had intended to leave it to me as the only daughter-in-law. But not if Patricia had her way. Gritting my teeth, I forced a reassuring smile for Emma's sake. It's okay, honey. Why don't you go play in your room for a bit? Mommy needs to make a call. Once Emma was out of earshot, I dialed Mark's number with shaking fingers. He had to know what his mother was up to. The woman had truly stooped to a new low. Mark's voice was laced with concern when he answered. Jess, what's wrong? Is it the baby? No, it's your mother. The words tumbled out in a rush. Emma saw her take Nana's necklace from her room. There was a heavy silence, then a weary sigh. Are you sure Emma saw correctly? You know how kids can misinterpret things. She was adamant, Mark. And when have you ever known Emma to lie? I fought to keep my voice steady. Your mother has been angling for that necklace for years. We both know it. Another pause, then. All right, let me talk to her. We'll get to the bottom of this. But even as I waited for Mark to return from confronting his mother, I knew deep down that it was futile. Patricia's web of lies and manipulation had only grown thicker over the years, ensnaring us all. Sure enough, when Mark finally emerged, his expression was grim. She denied everything, of course, and she's threatening to sue us for defamation if we pursue this any further. White-hot rage coursed through me. She can't just get away with this. That necklace was meant for our family. Mark held up a placating hand. I know, but we can't accuse her without proof, Jess. You know how crafty she can be. That's when it hit me, the security camera my neighbor had recently installed with a perfect view of Nana's bedroom window. If Patricia had swiped that necklace, there would be footage. Mark must have seen the resolve in my eyes because he shook his head vehemently. No, Jess, don't even think about it. You know how vindictive she can be if she feels backed into a corner. But I was already moving, propelled by a newfound sense of determination. Enough was enough. It was time to strip away Patricia's carefully constructed facade once and for all, no matter the cost. How could you, Mom? You have no idea what you've unleashed. Mark's words sliced through the tense silence, his voice trembling with a rare fury. We stood in the lawyer's office, the damning evidence of Patricia's misdeeds laid bare before us. The security footage had been merely the tip of the iceberg. Once we started digging, a trail of deceit and embezzlement had unraveled, implicating Patricia in a tangled web of financial crimes spanning decades. Letters and documents bombarded us from all sides, demands for repayment, legal threats, even whispers of criminal charges. All this time, while we had been bowing to her every whim, Patricia had been systematically draining Nana's estate, lining her own pockets without a shred of remorse. And now, finally confronted with the truth, she had nowhere left to hide. Patricia lifted her chin defiantly, her icy gaze sweeping over us with undisguised contempt. "Don't act so righteous, Mark. You're just as complicit in all of this." Mark recoiled as if struck. "What are you talking about? I had no idea." "Oh, please." Patricia's lip curled into a sneer. "You think I could have pulled off this level of theft without your help? All those favors I asked for over the years, the endless financial bleeding, you enabled every bit of it." Her words hung heavy in the air, poisonous barbs aimed straight at my husband's heart. To my horror, Mark's shoulders slumped, his eyes clouding with shame. I didn't realize," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to keep the peace, to make you happy." A bitter laugh erupted from Patricia's throat, harsh and mocking. "Happy? Is that what you think this was about?" She shook her head slowly, almost pityingly. "You're more of a fool than I ever gave you credit for, son." With a sinking feeling, I realized the true depths of her depravity. This had never been about money or status or any of the shallow trappings she had used to justify her cruelty. No, this was about raw, unbridled malice, an insatiable hunger to demean and destroy anyone who dared cross her path, including her own flesh and blood. "You're a monster," I spat, the words ripped from my very soul. "How could you do this to your own family?" For the briefest of moments, something flickered in Patricia's eyes, a glimmer of vulnerability, a fleeting glimpse of the wounded creature lurking beneath that steely exterior. But then it was gone, swallowed up by the vast, yawning chasm of her hatred. "Family?" she scoffed. "You have no idea what that word even means." With a dismissive flick of her wrist, she turned on her heel and strode towards the door, leaving a deafening silence in her wake. We could do nothing but watch, stunned into immobility, as the true architect of our suffering slipped through our fingers once more. But this time, something had shifted. A line had been crossed, irrevocably severing whatever twisted bonds still tethered us to this vile woman. As the weight of her betrayal threatened to crush us, a new resolve took root. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Patricia's health declined rapidly after her secrets did. It was as if her body, having harbored so much darkness for so long, could no longer contain the poison she had allowed to fester. At first, the changes were subtle, a persistent cough, a gaunt pallor, the occasional tremor in her hands. But soon they became impossible to ignore or dismiss as mere side effects of aging. "She's not well," Mark confided in me one evening, his voice heavy with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Concern? Regret? "The doctors can't seem to find a cause." I said nothing, watching the flicker of flames in the fireplace as an uneasy silence stretched between us. A part of me, the wounded, vengeful part that Patricia had nurtured through years of torment, felt a grim sense of satisfaction at her deterioration. This was justice, was it not? A fitting punishment for her litany of sins? And yet, another part of me recoiled from such thoughts, sickened by the realization that I had allowed this woman's toxic influence to seep into the very core of my being. "Do you think—" Mark began, then trailed off, seemingly unable to voice the notion that had taken root in both our minds. That Patricia's affliction was not purely physical, but a manifestation of something deeper, a sickness of the soul, wrought by her own hand. In the weeks that followed, Patricia's condition only worsened, each day stripping away another layer of her former self. The haughty, immaculate woman who had once struck terror into our hearts grew frail and disheveled, her piercing gaze dulled by a perpetual fog of confusion. It should have been a victory, seeing the once formidable matriarch laid so low. But as word of her deterioration spread through the community like wildfire, a disturbing shift took place. The tongues that had once whispered in fearful reverence of Patricia now wagged with open disdain, reveling in her downfall with undisguised glee. Everywhere we went, The stares and snide remarks followed, a silent chorus of schadenfreude that chilled me to the bone. Had our small town always harbored such cruelty, such pettiness, lurking just beneath the surface? Or had Patricia's brand of toxic malice simply given them permission to unleash their own baser natures? Either way, the effect on Mark was devastating. His already fragile relationship with his mother, fractured beyond repair by her betrayal, now hung by a gossamer thread. Each new humiliation, each barbed comment seemed to chip away at what little remained of his connection to the woman who had given him life. Until finally, on a crisp autumn evening, the last thread snapped. "We have to go," he said abruptly, startling me from my reverie by the fire. "Get the kids ready. We're leaving town for a while." I opened my mouth to protest, but the look in his eyes stopped me cold. There was a hunted quality to them that I had never seen before, a desperation born of too many wounds, too much suffering. So I did as he asked, gathering our meager belongings and bundling Emma and Jamie into the car without a word. And as we pulled away from the house that had once been our sanctuary, leaving Patricia and all her toxic legacy behind, a profound sense of peace washed over me. It was over. The cycle was broken, the tendrils of her hatred no longer able to reach us. Or so I thought.